I still remember the way my boss looked at me that morning, the smug grin, the fake sympathy, and the way she said, "You should be grateful, not everyone gets a raise these days." My stomach tightened as I stared at the numbers on the paper, 4%. 4. After 3 years of working late nights, missing weekends, and cleaning up other people's messes, that was what my hard work was worth to them. I tried to smile. I really did. But the words slipped out before I could stop them. "That's it." The moment I said it, the room went cold. She leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and gave me that look, the one that said I just made a huge mistake. "I'm sorry, what did you expect?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. I took a slow breath. "I just thought after everything I've done for the company." She cut me off. "You're being ungrateful, you know that. Most people would be happy just to have a job right now." Ungrateful. That word hit me harder than I expected. Because if anyone had been loyal, it was me. I was the one staying up till midnight to fix last-minute presentations. I was the one taking client calls on weekends, skipping family dinners, and even canceling a vacation once because she said the team needed me. And yet, there I was, being called ungrateful for wanting a fair raise. I left her office with my heart pounding and my mind racing. The open office was quiet except for the soft tapping of keyboards and the hum of the air conditioner. Everyone looked busy, pretending not to notice me walk out, but I could feel their eyes on me. I knew they heard everything. That's how it was in that place. Everyone knew everything, but no one said a word. As I sat down at my desk, I stared at my computer screen without really seeing anything. I wasn't angry yet, just tired of being taken for granted, tired of giving my best to people who only saw me as a number. I scrolled through the report I was working on for one of our biggest clients, Horizon Tech. They were massive, and honestly, most of our revenue came from them. I'd built that relationship from scratch. They trusted me more than anyone else in the company. In fact, half the time, they called me directly instead of going through my boss. And that's when the thought first crossed my mind, small at first, almost like a whisper. What if I just walked away? It sounded impossible, scary even. But once the idea took root, it didn't leave. I tried to push it away, to tell myself to be patient, that maybe next year would be better. But the truth was, I already knew next year would be the same. People like me didn't get rewarded in that office. We got used. Later that day, I got a call from Daniel, the head of Horizon Tech's operations team. He was frustrated about some delay on our side, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. "You're the only one who actually gets things done there," he said half-jokingly. I laughed, but inside, something clicked. "You know, Daniel," I said carefully, "sometimes I feel like I'm doing more for you than my own company." He chuckled. "Wouldn't surprise me. You're practically part of our team at this point." I don't know what made me say it, but the words came out naturally. "Maybe I should be." There was a pause on the line. Then Daniel said quietly, "If you're serious, call me." For a few seconds, I just sat there, phone in hand, heart racing. Was he joking? Was he actually offering me something? I didn't know. But one thing was certain, the seed had been planted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my boss's voice echoing in my head. "You're being ungrateful." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was ungrateful. But not for the reasons she thought. I wasn't ungrateful for the job. I was ungrateful for being undervalued, for being made to feel small. The next morning, I walked into the office early. The sun hadn't even fully risen yet, and the place was empty. I looked around at the gray walls, the same desk I'd sat at for years, the same tired coffee machine that barely worked. Everything suddenly looked different, colder, emptier. My boss arrived around 9. She didn't even look at me when she walked past my desk. That was fine. I'd already decided I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to please her anymore. By lunch, I drafted my resignation letter. My hands trembled a little as I typed, not from fear but from something else, excitement. Freedom was just a few clicks away. But before I could hit send, my inbox pinged. It was a company-wide email from my boss, announcing that I'd be leading the Horizon Tech account's next big project, a massive deal that could make or break our year. I stared at the screen, stunned. Part of me wanted to delete my resignation right then and there. This project was huge. It was everything I'd been working toward. But then I realized this wasn't recognition. It was strategy. She was giving me the project because she knew I wouldn't say no. She was counting on my loyalty one last time. I sat back, closed my eyes, and smiled. If that's how she wanted to play it, fine. But this time, I wasn't going to play by her rules. I didn't send the resignation that day. Instead, I got to work. Harder than ever. I poured everything into that project. Late nights, endless meetings, perfect presentations. Horizon Tech loved every detail. They told me multiple times, "We couldn't have done this without you." And they were right. The day of the final presentation arrived. My boss took all the credit, of course. She stood there in front of the executives, flashing her fake smile, acting like she'd done it all herself. I just stood quietly beside her, pretending not to notice. But inside I was calm, because I already knew something she didn't. After the meeting, Daniel pulled me aside. "Are you still thinking about what we talked about?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "More than ever." He smiled. "Good. Let's talk soon." As I walked back to my desk, I caught my boss watching me from her office window. For a split second, our eyes met. She gave me a tight smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. I smiled back, but this time it wasn't fake, because she had no idea what was coming next. That night, as I shut down my computer and packed up my things, the office was quiet again. But it didn't feel like defeat this time. It felt like the calm before a storm. I wasn't just leaving a job anymore. I was walking toward something bigger, and I was taking more than my skills with me. Because when you call someone ungrateful for knowing their worth, you shouldn't be surprised when they finally show you just how much they were worth all along. And what came next? Well, let's just say my boss would soon find out exactly what ungrateful really looks like. The next few days at work felt strange. On the surface, everything was the same. The endless emails, the polite smiles in the hallway, the coffee that always tasted slightly burnt. But underneath, there was a quiet shift. Something inside me had changed. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. Every task, every meeting, every fake compliment from my boss just reminded me of how much I'd outgrown this place. Still, I played along. I showed up on time, delivered flawless reports, and even laughed at her small talk during meetings. It was like I was wearing a mask, pretending everything was fine. But every night, I worked on something else, my plan. I started reaching out to a few trusted contacts, updating my portfolio, quietly setting things in motion. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest coworker, Jenna. She'd been my friend since my first day at the company, and I knew she'd sense something was off, but I couldn't risk it. One afternoon, I found myself sitting across from her in the break room. She sipped her coffee and studied me with that knowing look. "You're quieter lately," she said softly. "What's going on with you?" I forced a smile. "Just tired, I guess. This project's been a lot." She nodded. "Yeah, but you love challenges. This isn't just stress. It's something else, isn't it?" I wanted to tell her everything. About the phone call with Daniel, about the plan slowly forming in my head. But I didn't. I couldn't. "Maybe I'm just realizing what I want," I said finally. Her eyes softened. "Whatever it is, I hope it's worth it." That sentence stuck with me all day. I hope it's worth it. Because deep down, I knew what I was doing could change everything. Not just for me, but for the company too. Horizon Tech wasn't just another client. They were the heartbeat of our business. Losing them would hurt badly. And yet, I couldn't ignore the fact that I was the one holding that heartbeat in my hands. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. My boss didn't value people. She valued control. Every raise, every promotion, every project was calculated to keep us dependent on her approval. And I'd played along for too long. That 4% raise had opened my eyes, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. It showed me exactly how much, or rather how little, I meant to them. A few days later, Daniel called again. "Listen," he said. "We're thinking about expanding our partnership, new campaigns, bigger investments. But honestly, I can't imagine doing it without you leading the charge. You've been the backbone of this account." I took a breath. "Daniel, I need to be honest. Things here aren't great. I've been thinking about moving on." He didn't sound surprised. "I figured. And if you do, I want you to know something. Horizon would follow you. You've built our trust, not your company. Think about that. When I hung up, I just sat there in silence. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from realization. 4 years, I thought I needed this company to succeed. But maybe it was the other way around. Maybe they needed me. I started to notice small things, how my boss suddenly became extra nice in meetings, how she copied me on every client email, even when it wasn't necessary. It was like she could sense my detachment, control slipping through her fingers. One evening, she called me into her office. "You've been doing great work," she said, forcing a smile. "Horizon Tech is really happy, and I wanted to thank you for that." I nodded. "Thank you." Then she leaned forward. "I also wanted to remind you that everything you do here, the strategies, the client relationships, belongs to the company. You understand that, right?" Her tone wasn't friendly anymore. It was warning me. I met her gaze calmly. "Of course," I said, even though we both knew she didn't believe me. That conversation confirmed it. She knew something. Or at least she suspected. I had to be careful now. No more hints, no more side comments. Every move had to be quiet, clean, and planned. That night, I stayed late again, pretending to finalize the next stage of the Horizon Tech proposal. The office was empty except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking, my mind racing. I wasn't stealing anything. I wasn't sabotaging anyone. I was simply taking what was mine, the relationships I built, the trust one earned, the work I poured myself into. If my boss had truly valued me, maybe things would have been different. But she'd made her choice when she called me ungrateful. The next morning, I got to the office early again. The sunrise spilled through the tall glass windows, turning the space golden for a brief moment before the usual gray took over. I watched people trickle in one by one, their faces tired, their smiles forced. I realized most of them were just like me, hardworking, overlooked, surviving on the hope that maybe one day someone would finally notice their worth. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I met Daniel later that week for coffee, a casual catch-up, as we called it. We sat near the window, away from anyone who might recognize me. He got straight to the point. "If you're serious about leaving, we'd be happy to bring you on board. Maybe even set up a new branch around your expertise. Horizon trusts you." His words sank in slowly, each one heavier than the last. "That's a big step," I said, stirring my coffee just to keep my hands busy. "I know," he said. "But think about it. You'd have creative freedom, real growth, and none of the corporate nonsense. Plus," he paused, lowering his voice, "we'd probably pull our account from your old company. It wouldn't feel right continuing without you." There it was, the unspoken truth, finally said aloud. I looked out the window, trying to process it all. My heart was beating fast, but not from guilt, from power. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own life again. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. And I did. Every day. Every night. I thought about the risks, the backlash, the what-ifs. But no matter how much I tried to talk myself out of it, my heart kept saying the same thing. It's time. Meanwhile, my boss grew more paranoid. She started sitting in on every call with Horizon Tech, interrupting me mid-sentence, trying to assert authority. But Daniel barely acknowledged her. His attention was always on me, and she noticed. One day after a meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she hissed quietly, "but don't forget who gave you this opportunity." I looked at her, calm and steady. "I haven't forgotten," I said softly, "but maybe I've outgrown it." Her eyes narrowed. "Be careful." I smiled faintly. "Always." As she walked away, I felt a strange mix of fear and freedom. The tension between us had reached its peak, and there was no going back now. I knew the moment I handed in my resignation, everything would explode. But I also knew one thing: I wasn't backing down. Each day that passed only made me more certain. The company had drained me for years, but now I was finally taking back control. I wasn't just quitting a job, I was reclaiming my worth. And somewhere deep down, I knew my boss was right about one thing: I wasn't grateful anymore. I was done being grateful for less than I deserved. What she didn't know was that when I walked out those doors, I wouldn't be walking out alone. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, calculated, and it leaves the people who underestimated you wondering how they never saw it coming. The next few weeks were a blur of tension, fake smiles, and carefully measured words. Every morning, I walked into the office pretending nothing had changed, but inside, everything was shifting. I was no longer part of that place. I was simply passing through it. My boss, though, had started watching me more closely. I could feel her eyes on me during meetings, the way she'd hover by my desk pretending to check in. Her tone sugary but her gaze sharp. She knew something was off. She just couldn't figure out what. At first, I tried to ignore it, but her behavior got worse. She started calling unnecessary team meetings, reviewing my work in front of others, and questioning decisions I'd been making for years without issue. It was clear she was trying to re-establish control, to remind me of my place. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already stopped caring. Every insult, every passive-aggressive comment only made it easier to detach. Meanwhile, Horizon Tech was expanding their partnership. They wanted new campaigns, fresh strategies, and more direct involvement from me. It was flattering, but it also made things riskier. Every email, every meeting with them felt like a balancing act, saying just enough to keep things professional, but not so much that my boss would suspect what was really going on. One Friday afternoon, during a video call with Horizon, my boss joined uninvited. She smiled too wide, spoke too loudly, and kept interrupting me with unnecessary points. Daniel's expression said it all. He was polite, but clearly irritated. After the meeting, I got a message from him that simply said, "She's getting worse, isn't she?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "You have no idea." That weekend, I finally met with Daniel and a few members of his executive team. It wasn't planned, at least not officially. We met at a quiet restaurant outside the city where no one from the office would see us. I remember feeling nervous walking in, like I was doing something forbidden, even though all we were doing was talking. But in that conversation, everything changed. Daniel leaned forward and said, "We've been thinking about this. We're launching a new division, more innovative, more flexible. We want you to lead it. It wouldn't be under your current company. It would be separate, independent." I froze for a second. "You mean work for you?" He smiled. "Not for us. With us. You'd run your own consultancy. Horizon would be your first client." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just leaving my job. This was freedom, ownership, everything I dreamed of but never thought possible. But with that freedom came risk, and a storm I knew was waiting back at the office. I asked for a few days to think, though deep down, I already knew the answer. Back at work, the pressure was mounting. My boss had started holding progress check-ins twice a day. She claimed it was to keep the project on track, but it was really about keeping me on a leash. Even my teammates started noticing. One of them whispered to me during lunch, "Did you do something to upset her? She's been on edge lately." I just smiled and said, "Guess she's stressed about the deadline." But stress wasn't the problem. Control was. And she was losing it, one client conversation at a time. A small subplot started unfolding around then. Jenna, my closest friend in the office, was being blamed for mistakes she didn't make. Reports she'd filed perfectly were accidentally deleted, and my boss started questioning her competence in front of the team. It was obvious she was using Jenna as a distraction. I tried to help, quietly fixing her reports and covering for her, but it only made my boss more suspicious. One day, Jenna pulled me aside, her voice shaking. "I think she's trying to push me out," she said. "You know how she gets when someone stands too close to you." I hesitated. She wasn't wrong. My boss hated anyone who shared credit with me. It was like she believed keeping people isolated made them easier to control. "Just hang in there," I said softly. "Things are going to change soon." She gave me a confused look, but didn't ask what I meant. I think part of her knew I was planning something. Meanwhile, I was drafting my proposal for Horizon's new branch. Every night I worked late from home, shaping plans, budgets, timelines, all under the radar. I told myself I wasn't being disloyal, I was being smart. This wasn't betrayal. It was survival. The tension hit a breaking point during a client dinner. My boss insisted on joining, even though she wasn't invited. The dinner was supposed to be casual, a way to discuss next quarter's goals. But she turned it into a performance, talking over me, bragging about her leadership, and taking credit for things she hadn't even been part of. Daniel stayed polite, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. At one point, he leaned toward me and whispered, "You don't belong here anymore." That line replayed in my head all night. He was right. I'd outgrown the office, the politics, the manipulation, all of it. But walking away wasn't as simple as quitting. I had to protect my name, my work, and the people who believed in me. A week later, things escalated. My boss called me into her office again, her expression unreadable. "I heard from a friend at Horizon," she began, pretending to be casual. "They said you've been very close with their team lately. More than necessary." I kept my face calm. "I'm managing the account. That's my job." She smiled tightly. "Just remember, loyalty matters here. I'd hate to see a misunderstanding ruin your reputation." It was a threat, thinly disguised as advice. That night, I sat in my car outside the office long after everyone had left, watching the lights flicker through the windows. The building looked so different from the outside, cold, lifeless, small. It hit me then that I didn't owe this place anything anymore. They'd taken my time, my energy, my passion. And in return, they gave me 4% and a word, ungrateful. I went home and opened my laptop. The resignation letter was already written, waiting in my drafts. I stared at it for a long time before saving one final version. But I didn't send it yet. Not until everything was ready. Because when I walked out, I wanted it to count. In the days that followed, I began quietly moving pieces. I had conversations with potential team members, people I trusted who were also tired of being overlooked. I reached out to vendors, legal advisors, even a designer for branding. It all felt surreal, like I was living two lives at once. By day, the perfect employee. By night, the architect of something entirely new. My boss must have sensed it. Her mood swung wildly, overly friendly one moment, cold and distant the next. She started asking strange questions, like where I saw myself in 5 years or whether I was happy here. I answered politely, but inside, I was counting the days. Then came an email from Daniel. "It's time. We're ready when you are." Those words sealed it. Everything I'd endured, the long nights, the belittling, the fear, it all led to this moment. The pieces were finally in place, but I couldn't make a single mistake. The final week felt like walking on glass. My boss grew increasingly suspicious, hovering in every meeting, checking every document I touched. She even called me late one night just to clarify a line in a report. Her paranoia was consuming her, and I almost felt sorry, almost. On the surface, everything looked normal, but underneath, the storm was building. And I knew that when it finally broke, nothing in that office would ever be the same again. Because she thought calling me ungrateful would keep me small. She didn't realize it would make me unstoppable. And as I stared at the glowing screen that night, my resignation letter open once again, I whispered to myself, tomorrow. Tomorrow, everything changes. The night before everything changed, I barely slept. My resignation letter sat in my drafts, ready to send, but my finger hovered over the mouse more than once before I closed the laptop again. It wasn't doubt, it was anticipation. I knew once I sent that email, there'd be no turning back. All the fake smiles, the forced gratitude, the long nights that went unnoticed, they'd all finally lead to this moment. I arrived early the next morning, long before anyone else. The office was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my desk, staring at the same monitor that had witnessed every late night, every tear of frustration, every small victory no one cared about. The clock ticked softly, almost mocking me. My phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "We're ready," his message read. "Once you send it, call me." I typed my resignation email, short and professional. I didn't bother explaining too much. People like my boss didn't deserve explanations. They only understood power when it slipped out of their hands. I saved the email as a draft one last time. I wanted to send it when she was watching, to see her reaction, to let her realize exactly what she'd lost. By 9 a.m., the office was buzzing. People were talking, laughing, planning weekend trips. I sat quietly, my heart racing. My boss walked in wearing her usual confident smile, greeting everyone as if nothing could shake her. When she reached her office, she called out, I need you in my office in 10. Her voice was sharp, like she was already in attack mode. I took a deep breath, grabbed my notepad, and walked in. She didn't offer me a seat this time. She stood by her desk, arms crossed. I just got off the phone with Horizon, she said. They told me something interesting. I kept my face neutral. Oh, they said you've been consulting with them directly. After hours. Off company time. Her tone was controlled, but her eyes burned. I stayed calm. I've been handling their account like always. You know that. She stepped closer. Don't play dumb. I know you've been planning something. Do you think I wouldn't find out? For a moment, the room felt smaller. The air was thick, tense. But instead of fear, I felt something else, relief. The pretending was almost over. I looked at her steadily. You're right. You finally figured it out. Her expression faltered, confusion flickering across her face. Excuse me. I smiled faintly. I'm leaving. She blinked, like she hadn't heard me. Leaving? Don't be ridiculous. You have a contract. You can't just walk out, especially not with a major client project halfway done. That's exactly why I'm telling you now, I said. So you have time to prepare. Her voice rose. Prepare? You're abandoning your team in the middle of our biggest deal. I met her eyes. You mean your biggest deal? The one you've been taking credit for? Her face flushed red. You are making a huge mistake. I didn't reply. I just turned, walked out of her office, and back to my desk. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. I opened the email and clicked send. The message left my outbox at 9:42 a.m. It was done. Within minutes, the office mood shifted. My boss must have seen the email because her door slammed shut. A few coworkers looked up, whispering to each other. I didn't care. I packed my things slowly, each sound amplified. The closing of drawers, the soft zip of my bag, the clink of my coffee mug. Then my phone rang. Daniel. Is it done? He asked. Yes. Good, he said. Then it's time for part 2. Part 2. The words echoed in my mind. This was it, the real turning point. We'd already discussed the plan weeks ago, carefully, quietly. Horizon's contract renewal was due that week. They were supposed to sign an extension with my company. But Daniel had stalled, saying he wanted to review a few final details. What my boss didn't know was that the new contract had already been drafted, under my name, for my new consultancy. Horizon wasn't just leaving. They were coming with me. The moment the news reached her, she stormed out of her office. What's going on? She demanded, her voice loud enough for the entire floor to hear. I looked up calmly. I just sent my resignation. Her face twisted with disbelief. You can't. You're under a non-compete clause. I checked, I said. It expired last month. For a second, she just stared at me, speechless. Then her expression hardened. You're going to regret this. No one crosses me and walks away unscathed. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my bag and walked toward the elevator. Each step felt heavier, yet freeing. The chatter around me faded, replaced by the steady hum of the elevator doors opening. As I stepped in, I glanced back one last time. She stood there, frozen in the middle of the office, surrounded by the team that once admired her. For the first time, she looked small, powerless, but the storm wasn't over. Later that day, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, emails, messages from coworkers asking what happened. Some were curious, others quietly supportive. But the one message that made me pause came from Jenna. She's losing it, she wrote. She's in a meeting with the board right now. They found out Horizon's pulling out. I stared at the screen, a mix of satisfaction and unease rising in me. I didn't want revenge for the sake of it. I just wanted fairness, respect. But seeing how quickly everything was unraveling made me realize just how fragile her power really was. An hour later, Daniel called again. It's official. The contract signed. Horizon's moving forward with your firm. My chest tightened. You're serious? Completely, he said. And by the way, word's spreading fast. You might want to check your email. When I opened my inbox, I saw dozens of messages, former clients, old contacts, even a few coworkers asking if I was hiring. It was overwhelming, like years of silence and invisibility had suddenly cracked open into recognition. But in the middle of all that, I knew this was only the beginning. Because people like my boss didn't go down quietly. I could already imagine her pacing her office, scheming, blaming, trying to find a way to turn the situation around. And she would try, she always did. The tension built again that evening when my phone buzzed with her name. I hesitated before answering. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Congratulations," she said. "You must feel proud of yourself." "I do," I said simply. "You think you've won," she continued, her tone sharp now. "But you have no idea what you've started." I let her words hang in the air. "Maybe not," I said finally, "but at least I started something that's mine." There was a long pause, and then she hung up. I sat there in the quiet, staring out the window as the city lights flickered below. My heart was racing, not from fear this time, but from the unknown. I'd taken the first step, but the war wasn't over. I could already feel it. The storm was just beginning. Somewhere deep down, I knew she wasn't going to let this go easily. There would be backlash, rumors, maybe even legal threats. But no matter what came next, I was ready. Because this wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about dignity, self-worth, and proving that no one has the right to make you feel small for knowing your value. And as the night stretched on, the city lights glowing against the dark sky, I realized something. Sometimes, the scariest moments are the ones right before everything changes. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of calls, messages, and headlines spreading through the corporate network. The tension had reached its peak. The boss wasn't done fighting, and neither was I. But that part was still to come. The next morning, everything felt different. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, notifications, missed calls, messages piling up faster than I could read them. At first, I thought it was just more fallout from my resignation. But then I saw a subject line that made my stomach twist. Confidential report leak. I opened the email and my heart dropped. Attached was a screenshot of an internal document, one that had my name on it. It looked like I had leaked sensitive company data to Horizon before leaving. The timestamp made it worse. It showed the file was sent a week before my resignation. It wasn't true. I'd never share that file. But the evidence looked real. My hands trembled as I scrolled down and saw who had forwarded the email, my boss. She'd sent it to the board, the HR head, and even to a few clients. The message she'd written above the screenshot was short but poisonous. "This explains her sudden success." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. She had gone exactly where I feared she would. If this rumor spread, it could destroy everything I'd built before it even began. My reputation, my credibility, all of it could vanish overnight. I called Daniel immediately. "She's accusing me of leaking files," I said, my voice tight. He paused. "That's serious. But calm down. We'll handle it. Do you still have access to your old company drive?" "Only for another day," I said. "They haven't revoked it yet." "Good," he replied. "Check the logs. See if anyone accessed your account recently." I opened my laptop and logged in. My fingers moved fast, heart pounding. I navigated to the admin panel and pulled up the activity history. There it was. Someone had downloaded files under my username 2 nights ago, long after I'd stopped working there. The IP address didn't match mine. It came from inside the office. I whispered. She set me up. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "Then we prove it. Don't confront her yet. Just gather everything." For the next few hours, I worked silently, collecting every log, every trace. Each file felt like a piece of a puzzle that confirmed what I already knew. She had crossed a line, desperate to destroy me before I could rise. By afternoon, word was spreading fast. A few old coworkers texted me things like, "Did you really send company data?" And, "She's saying you broke policy." I didn't reply. There was no point defending myself without proof. But inside, anger simmered beneath my calm exterior. Then came the unexpected twist. The board contacted me directly. They wanted to meet the next morning. My ex-boss had reported me formally, and they were investigating. I could tell this wasn't just about reputation anymore. It could affect my entire career. That night, I sat by the window, the city lights flickering below like restless thoughts. My mind replayed every interaction with her, the fake compliments, the controlling tone, the quiet manipulations. I realized she wasn't just fighting to save her position. She was terrified of being exposed. And I was the one who could expose her. Daniel called again. "Listen," he said. "There's something else you should know. One of your old coworkers, Jenna, just reached out to me. She says your boss made her help with something shady. She's scared but willing to talk." My pulse quickened. "Talk about what?" "She says your boss asked her to use your login credentials. She didn't know why at first. But when she saw that report leak, she realized what was happening." I stood up, pacing. "If she'll testify, I can clear my name." Daniel hesitated. "There's more. Jenna also said your boss isn't acting alone. Someone higher up's backing her. Someone on the board." The words hit me like a punch. I'd expected betrayal from my boss, but not from above. It suddenly made sense why she was so confident, so untouchable. The real power wasn't just hers, it was protected. That night, I barely slept again. My mind was racing, caught between fear and resolve. The stakes had never been higher. If I lost this fight, everything I'd worked for would crumble before it began. But if I could prove the truth, everything would change, not just for me, but for everyone she'd silenced over the years. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom. My boss was already there, sitting confidently with her usual smirk. Beside her were 3 board members, one of whom avoided meeting my eyes. I noticed that small detail, and it told me everything. She started speaking before I could even sit. "I think we all know why we're here. It's unfortunate when someone's ambition leads them to unethical choices." Her words dripped with venom. The others nodded politely, pretending neutrality. But I saw the tension in their faces. They'd already heard her version of the story. I took a deep breath. "I agree," I said softly. "Unethical choices should never go unpunished." She frowned slightly, sensing something in my tone. I opened my folder and laid out printed logs on the table. "These are system access records from the company server. You'll see that my credentials were used 2 nights ago from an internal office IP. That was after I left." The board members leaned in, curiosity replacing indifference. My boss's expression didn't change, but her fingers twitched. "And," I continued, "this is a statement from Jenna, confirming she was asked to log in using my account. She didn't know why until she saw the leak. I've also backed this with a timestamp and screenshots." Silence filled the room. My boss's confident smirk faltered. The board member who'd avoided my eyes earlier shifted uncomfortably. Finally, one of them spoke. "This is serious." I nodded. "It is. Because it doesn't just show a setup, it shows collusion." My boss's voice cracked slightly when she spoke. "You're lying. This is all fake." But her voice lacked conviction. I met her gaze, steady and calm. "You underestimated me," I said quietly. "You thought I'd leave quietly. But I'm not the same person who used to sit in your office and say yes to everything. I'm done being silent." The room was thick with tension. No one spoke for several seconds. Then one of the board members cleared his throat. "We'll review this evidence immediately." As I walked out, my knees were trembling, but my heart felt stronger than ever. I didn't know what the outcome would be yet, but I knew the truth was finally breaking through. Outside the boardroom, I stopped by the elevator. My phone buzzed. Another message from Daniel. "Be ready. There's something else coming." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He replied instantly. "Someone from the board is leaking information too. It's not over yet." The doors closed, and my reflection in the elevator glass looked different. Tired, yes, but determined. The war wasn't over. It was just entering its most dangerous phase. Because now, it wasn't just me against my boss. It was me against the system that protected her. The next day felt like walking straight into a storm I'd been preparing for, but still didn't feel ready to face. My phone rang early that morning. It was Daniel again. His voice was sharp but calm. "They're calling an emergency board meeting today," he said. "Your evidence forced their hand. But there's something else. You should be prepared for a surprise." I didn't ask what he meant. I just took a deep breath, got dressed, and drove to the building I once called my second home. Every turn of the road felt heavier, memories flashing by. The late nights, the coffee runs, the times I stayed back fixing her mistakes just to earn her approval. It all came rushing back, and I realized how much I had changed since then. When I entered the office, everyone went silent. Eyes followed me as I walked down the hall. Some were curious, others cautious. A few even smiled quietly, as if rooting for me but afraid to show it. My boss's door was open. She was inside, pretending to be busy, but I could feel her tension even from across the room. The board meeting started exactly at 10. The same faces as before, but this time the energy was different, charged, expectant. I sat across from her, and when our eyes met, I saw fear buried beneath her practiced smile. The chairman began. We've reviewed all evidence submitted, the logs, the witness statement, and the leaked data itself. It appears there were irregularities that point to internal tampering. My boss's lips twitched. With all due respect, I've served this company for 10 years. I find it insulting to be accused based on a single employee's claim. I stayed quiet, letting the silence stretch. The chairman turned to me. Do you have anything else to add? I nodded and reached into my folder. Yes. One final piece. I placed a flash drive on the table. This contains a recording. I didn't plan to use it, but I think it's time. I pressed play. The room filled with my boss's voice. Sharp, impatient, unmistakable. Just use her login. She'll be gone by the time anyone notices. I'll handle the rest. Gasps rippled across the table. She froze, color draining from her face. That's taken out of context, she snapped. But it was too late. The recording had done its job. The chairman leaned back, exhaling slowly. That's quite a context, don't you think? She stammered, trying to recover. You can't prove that's me. Another voice cut in. It was the board member who'd been silent before. You don't have to. I was there when it happened. I didn't speak up earlier because I was told to keep quiet. He glanced at her coldly. But I'm done protecting lies. The entire room fell into stunned silence. She looked around, realizing she had no one left to defend her. For the first time, her confidence completely cracked. The chairman finally spoke. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending formal investigation. We'll be reporting this to the authorities. Her chair screeched as she stood. You'll regret this, she hissed, but her voice shook. She turned toward me, eyes burning with fury. You think you've won? You're just as ungrateful as I said. I met her gaze steadily. No, I said quietly. I'm just done being silent. She left, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the room like the final note of a song that had played too long. When the meeting ended, a few board members stayed behind to thank me for handling things professionally. I didn't feel victorious, just relieved. The truth had finally caught up. Still, something inside me felt unsettled. Maybe it was the way the chairman avoided eye contact, or the faint tension that still lingered in the room. Later that afternoon, Daniel and I met at a nearby cafe. He looked both proud and cautious. You did it, he said. That recording sealed it. She's finished. I smiled weakly. I should feel happy, right? You should, he said, then hesitated. But there's something you need to know. That anonymous message I told you about, the one warning that someone from the board was involved? I traced it back. My heart skipped. Who was it? He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was an email header showing the sender's name, the chairman. For a second, I just stared. Wait, the chairman sent that? Daniel nodded. Looks like he knew more than he admitted. Maybe he used you to get rid of her. She was becoming a liability. I leaned back, processing it. The twist hit me hard. So all this time, he was just playing both sides. Maybe, Daniel said quietly. Or maybe he wanted to clean the company without getting his hands dirty. You were the perfect one to expose her. It was a bitter realization. The justice I thought I'd earned suddenly felt tainted. But then I remembered the way she treated everyone, how she'd crushed people's confidence, and I realized that even if someone had used me as part of their plan, I had still done the right thing. A week later, I received a call. The company wanted to offer me a consulting position, higher pay, full independence, and complete creative control over my projects. They said it was to restore trust and move forward positively. I almost laughed. After everything, they wanted me back, not as an employee but as a partner. The irony wasn't lost on me. I thanked them politely and declined. I'd already moved on. My new business with Daniel was growing faster than I'd imagined. The same clients who once ignored my emails were now reaching out to work with me directly. It felt like karma had finally caught up with the past. Still, the chairman's role lingered in my mind. I never confronted him about it, But sometimes I wondered if he was still pulling strings behind the scenes. Maybe he'd simply chosen a different kind of power, one that thrived in silence. Months later, I ran into one of my old coworkers. She told me my former boss had left the city altogether, trying to rebuild somewhere else. I felt no anger, no satisfaction, just closure. That night, as I looked out over the skyline, I realized how far I'd come. The same city lights that once felt suffocating now looked different, like quiet witnesses to my story. I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd won something far more valuable, freedom. But just when I thought the chapter had finally closed, I received one last email. No name, no signature, just a line that made my heart skip a beat. She wasn't the only one who tried to destroy you. Be careful who you trust next. I stared at the screen for a long moment. A chill ran through me, but then I smiled faintly. Maybe it was a warning, or maybe it was just the world reminding me that the story never truly ends. Because sometimes, even when you win, the game isn't over, it just changes its players. Days passed after that final email, and even though I tried to ignore it, the words kept echoing in my mind. Be careful who you trust next. It wasn't fear that kept me thinking about it, but curiosity. Who could have sent it? Maybe it was a warning from someone inside the company, or maybe from a person who knew more than I did about what was happening behind the scenes. But this time, instead of chasing answers, I let it be. Some things, I realized, were better left in the past. Life started settling into something new. My days no longer began with rushing to the office or checking emails that only brought stress. Instead, I woke up early, made my own coffee, and planned out my projects at my own pace. The small marketing firm Daniel and I built together started gaining recognition faster than either of us expected. Word spread that we treated our clients differently, more human, less corporate. Maybe people were tired of cold professionalism. Maybe they just wanted honesty. The first few weeks were overwhelming, but in the best way. I handled clients personally, learned to say no when needed, and made sure my small team never felt what I once felt, undervalued. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about creating something better. Still, every time I crossed paths with someone from my old company, I'd feel a quiet reminder of how close I'd come to giving up back then. Some of them reached out with apologies, saying they wished they'd spoken up when things went wrong. I didn't hold grudges. The truth was, I understood why they hadn't. Fear does strange things to people. It silences even the kindest hearts. One afternoon, while sorting through old files on my laptop, I found a folder labeled Old Projects. Inside were reports, designs, and presentations I had poured myself into during those long nights. But what caught my eye was a single file, an old email draft I never sent. It was addressed to my boss. The subject line read, about the raise. I opened it and read the words my past self had written but never had the courage to send. I appreciate the raise, but I can't help feeling like my work deserves more recognition. I've given my best, and I hope that counts for something. It hit me then how much I'd grown. Back then, I was scared to speak up because I thought gratitude meant staying silent. Now I knew better. Gratitude didn't mean settling. It meant knowing your worth and still choosing kindness over anger. I closed the laptop and smiled. That chapter was done. A few weeks later, I got an invitation to speak at a small business conference. The topic was integrity in the workplace. I almost declined. It felt strange to think people wanted to hear my story, but Daniel convinced me. Your story matters, he said. You turned something ugly into something powerful. When I stood on that stage, looking out at the faces in the audience, I realized how far I'd come. I didn't talk about revenge or betrayal. Instead, I talked about growth, about learning to stand up for yourself without losing your kindness. I shared how a 4% raise taught me one of the biggest lessons of my life. That appreciation without respect isn't real appreciation at all. After the talk, a young woman came up to me. She looked nervous, almost like I once did. I'm going through something similar, she said quietly. My boss keeps calling me ungrateful for wanting better pay. Hearing your story made me feel seen. Her words warmed my heart. That was the moment I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been made to feel small for asking for what they deserved. Months passed, and success started coming naturally. My firm signed a few major clients, including one that had once belonged to my old company. I didn't celebrate that as a win over them. It just felt like balance finding its place. One morning, while reviewing contracts, I received an email that made me pause. It was from the chairman. I wanted to personally thank you for how you handled everything. Things have changed here. We're building a better culture now, one based on fairness. I hope, one day, we can work together again. I read it twice. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that's enough. I replied simply, I'm glad to hear that. I wish you all the best. Then I closed the message and moved on. The old version of me might have wanted to dig deeper, wanted explanations, validation, or justice. But the person I'd become didn't need that anymore. I had already won, not by destroying anyone, but by walking away with my integrity intact. A few months later, my business expanded into a bigger space. On the first day in our new office, I stood by the window, looking out at the skyline again. The same city that once broke me was now my reminder that nothing is permanent, not failure, not fear, and definitely not being underestimated. Daniel walked in, grinning. Big day, huh? Yeah, I said. Feels like everything came full circle. He handed me a small box. What's this? I asked. Open it. Inside was a tiny metal plaque engraved with the words, Know your worth and never settle. I laughed softly. Perfect, I said. He smiled. It's not just your story anymore. It's our reminder. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the quiet office. I thought about the long journey, from the day my boss called me ungrateful to this exact moment. The anger, the pain, the doubt, it all led here. And maybe that's how life works. Sometimes the hardest endings lead to the most meaningful beginnings. Before shutting down my laptop, I opened that last anonymous email again. The one that had warned me to be careful. For the first time, I didn't feel fear reading it. I just smiled and whispered, I will. Then I deleted it, because I didn't need reminders anymore. I wasn't the person who waited for someone else to give me permission to rise. I had already built something real, something honest. And it all started because someone once tried to make me feel small for asking for what I was worth. In the end, that 4% raise wasn't the insult I thought it was. It was a spark that lit a fire I didn't know I had. It pushed me to find courage, to create something better, and to finally understand that success isn't about revenge, it's about growth. As I turned off the lights and stepped outside, the night air felt calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking toward something. And maybe that's what true freedom feels like. Not escaping your past, but learning to thank it for leading you here. The story ended there, quietly but powerfully. I didn't need applause or recognition, just peace, and I had finally found it.